Hi there, I'm here with the Hori V3. In this video tutorial, I'll be explaining the process of replacing your buttons with arcade components from Sanwa. So if you're wondering how you replace the lever, please be sure to visit my YouTube channel where I break down the process of replacing the lever. In this video, we'll be focusing on the buttons and the tools necessary to perform this mod. Although this is the V3, the same process applies to the Hori Fighting Stick VX. Keep in mind that modification of the Hori Fighting Stick V3 or VX can void your manufacturer's warranty, so please be careful when performing this mod. Okay, let me explain some of the tools that are necessary in order to perform this mod. They're pretty simple. What you see right here is a 15-watt soldering iron. It's from Radio Shack, about $10, $12. A 20-watt soldering iron for the larger pads. It's a lot more hotter than 15 watts, although it's 5 more watts. It makes a hell of a difference when it comes to temperature. Wire strippers and cutters. A screwdriver. And a solder remover. I prefer this one when working with sticks. Here's another desoldering tool. I prefer the previous desoldering tool much better when working with sticks. And there's also desoldering braid. You can use this to remove excess solder from the pads. I recommend, although not necessary, breathing protection as well as eye protection. This is the inside of the Hori PCB after you remove the back panel. On the bottom right you have the main PCB. And connected to that, in the upper left hand corner, you have the daughterboard PCB that has the buttons soldered to them. This is a PCB we'll be working with for this button mod. In just about every mod I've seen online, I've noticed that people actually took this ribbon that connects from the PCB to the daughterboard, spliced it, soldered new wire to it, and from that wire attached a disconnect to connect to the buttons. If you check my video on the VX, you'll notice that I soldered directly to the PCB. So I soldered that wire to the PCB and then connected to the button. I did that because I did not want to damage the factory ribbon that you cannot replace. So you can choose either mod. I don't cover that tutorial on this video, but I will have pinouts of these wires so you can know what the values are when connecting to your buttons. Whichever method you choose, I chose the PCB instead of modifying the ribbon because the ribbon cannot be replaced. Before we begin the desoldering process, I actually want to take the time to show you the difference in power between a 15-watt and a 20-watt soldering iron. Although 5 watts may not sound like a lot, it's actually a ton of power when it comes to heating up things. So you can use a 15-watt, 20-watt, 30-watt, or even 40-watt when desoldering. But I recommend a 15-watt for beginners because the higher wattages equate to higher temperatures, and higher temperatures increase your risk of damaging components. An example of this would be applying so much heat to one area that you actually burn through the circuit board. We're not trying to accomplish this, so please be careful. Let's take a look at the 15-watt. When working with solder, I recommend that you not only become familiar with your area that you'll be soldering with or desoldering, but what's around the entire soldering iron and not just the tip, because the entire iron gives off heat and is capable of damaging anything inside and outside of the stick really quick. The desoldering process is simple. All you have to do is take the tip of the soldering iron, apply it to the solder on the pad until it liquefies, and at that point, once it's liquefied, is when you apply your desoldering tool to remove the solder. Now let's take a look at the 20-watt soldering iron. As you can see, being only 5 watts more, it heats up the solder pad almost twice as fast. So be sure not to leave the tip of the soldering iron on the same location for too long, or you could cause some damage. Here's another method of removing solder. This is desoldering braid. To use this, you have to place the desoldering braid on the area in which you want to desolder, and then heat up the braid to allow the solder to melt to the braid. This process takes a lot longer and it's only recommended to remove excess solder after you use a desoldering tool. Now this desoldering tool right here works by using suction to suck up the solder after you liquefied the pad. So you would place the solder tip to the pad, liquefy the pad, and then remove the solder. Now this is me actually removing the solder using this desoldering tool. I have two tools, but I use this primarily because it's easier to work with and it gives you a lot more suction. I have a full video of this on my YouTube channel if you want to see the full process of me desoldering the entire board. This whole process should not take longer than 15 to 20 minutes. Now this is what your board should look like after you completely desoldered the daughter board from the buttons. Keep in mind that if you do not desolder the joints completely, you can pull off the switches of the button and it will break the button. Okay, check this out. Once you completed those steps, your V3 or VX should look like the stick shown here with the daughter board and buttons completely removed, ready to be replaced with Sanwa or Seimitsu arcade parts. Now try to cover as much as possible in this video, but one area I was unable to cover was the wiring of the buttons. I did this for multiple reasons, but primarily I found this was unnecessary because more people were having issues with soldering. So I do go into wiring a little bit in the VX video, or if you need reference for wiring, you can check out the way I wired the VX inside the video tutorial where I explain the process of replacing the lever or the arcade stick with a Sanwa JLF. Be sure to check my channel for other YouTube videos relating to modifications for the V3 and VX.